Hey guys, Chris here. Matthew just got back from speaking in Singapore at 3D Sense. I'm glad he's back because he's wrote this article on Medium about how to create dynamic compositions, and he did a great job. I want him to show you guys and talk a little bit more about that. And in case you don't know who Matthew is, he's one of our two creative directors here. He's directed spots for Xbox, most recently for E3, for the launch of the Xbox One S, which was super cool. Check it out, links below to see that. And he's also directed music videos for bands like Coldplay. Heard of them? Check out that video, links below. Let's go talk to him. Hey. We got the people looking on the internet. We got some motion graphics people. Guys, this is Matthew Encina.
Hey, what's up?
You gotta check him out. Matthew, how do people get a hold of you on the internet?
At Matthew Encina. You can follow me everywhere.
At Matthew Encina on Instagram, on Twitter. We'll have the link below. And I'm asking you to kind of walk the people through a little bit about what's in your mind, what's it take to create a really cool composition. Can you tell the people a little bit about how you do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, we're getting it.
Let me try this again.
I want you guys to listen to me.
Yeah.
I design sandwiches. My name is Jose Caballero and I talk about the design of business. I talk about a lot of stuff.
My name is Chris Doe and I talk about the business of design.
At the center of this operating system, it's about understanding.
Jose, can we just tell them what the show title is?
I hate you, dude.
You are watching The Process.
Hello, Matthew Encina here with my first episode on the school. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to create dynamic compositions for your photos, designs, and typography using one key concept: adding contrast. I had such a great response to the article that I wrote on Medium the other week that I decided to turn this into a video so I could show you how easy it is to apply this key concept. If you haven't checked it out yet, go on to Medium and follow me at Matthew Encina, and you could read the full article there. So let's get right into it. So when I say add contrast, what I mean is everything that makes up any visual frame. So the size, weight, value, and color of your elements inside your frame. By adding contrast to these elements, you're able to control the eye and define the hierarchy, movement, and meaning, and ultimately tell better stories with your frames. Regardless if they're photos, illustrations, designs, it doesn't matter. This applies across the board. So let's jump into our first example here, and I'm going to show you that by adding contrast to a frame, you can give more meaning and tell a better story in the frame. So I've gone ahead and downloaded these two vector illustrations of an elk and a wolf. And we all know that the wolf is the predator and the elk is its prey. The way they're composed right now, we don't really get that. There's nothing that's telling us their relationship at all. So I'm going to show you that by adding some contrast, and not just a little contrast, I mean extreme. If I add a little bit of contrast here, it's still not doing much. So here's my first tip for you guys. When you're adding contrast, go extreme first, and then pull it back. So I'm going to do, I'm going to make this wolf really big. I'm going to flip him. There we go. And put this elk here. So now we're starting to establish the relationship between these two animals. I still think it's not enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to scale this wolf up much bigger so he feels a lot more dominant in the frame. I'm going to make this elk a bit smaller so he feels like he's in danger. There we go. See, just by simply adjusting their size and making more contrast between the two, we're able to make a much clearer relationship between the predator and the prey. Now I'm going to push this a little bit further and start adjusting their values. And typically the way this goes is things that are in the foreground tend to have more contrast, so they'll have brighter brights and darker darks. And as things recede into the background, they have a lot less contrast and lighter values. I think I want to push this elk back a little bit further. And then I'm going to add a little ground just to give this some context. So as you can see, just by adjusting the contrast now and their values, this wolf feels very dominant, feels like it's in the foreground. Maybe it's lurking within the trees, and this elk just kind of got alerted to its presence, and it's about to get pounced on. So I could show you the same story, but maybe we want to tell the story from the point of view of the elk. So we could flip this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the wolf much smaller. Put it in the background here, and I'm going to make the elk really big. Because I want to tell the point of view of the elk, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip their values and give this guy more contrast. Because one, it's in the foreground, but also I want my eye to go there first. And two, I kind of want to make the wolf feel a little bit more hidden in the background. Maybe he's sneaking around in the trees or bushes, and he doesn't want the elk to know that he's there. Let's make that a little bit darker. So now that we flipped the size and value of these two animals, now we're kind of changing the story a little bit. Now we're in the point of view from the elk. Maybe he was grazing here in the foreground. He heard something, maybe a branch snap in the background, and he's alerted to it. And now we have our wolf really tiny in the background. He's kind of sneaking around there, and he almost matches the value of the background here. Maybe if we get those closer, he'll feel a little bit more sneaky back there. Maybe he's hiding in the fog in the bushes. See? Simple enough, right? Notice I haven't changed the poses of these characters at all. Really, I'm just adjusting their scale and their values. But just by doing so, you can tell a much clearer story, who the subject is, and the relationship between the two subjects in the frame. Make sense? All right. Let's move on to our next example. So in the second example, I'm going to show you guys how you can define hierarchy in your frames just by simply adding a little bit of contrast. So here I've downloaded a lineup of knights and a king. I bet you didn't even notice him here in the middle of the lineup. And that's because everything right now is the same value, it's the same size, and nothing really stands out. By establishing some hierarchy in this frame, we can make it much clearer as to what the viewer is looking at first, second, and third. For me, I'd like to tell the story about this king right here and how he's leading his knights into battle. So I'm going to start by taking our king, making him really large in the frame. Make him feel like he's in the foreground by making him large and very dark. Let's bring him to the front. So now, right now, the king is the first read, and we see the knights behind him in the background. What I want to establish next is who his right-hand man is. Who is the person he trusts the most? So I'm going to grab this other knight here, scale him up, and he's going to be the second darkest thing in the frame. So he feels like he's standing right behind the king. Maybe in the story he has the ear of the king and he trusts him with everything. The rest of the knights, I'm going to make them the third read, the tertiary read, and I'm going to knock them back first a little bit in value. So I'm going to take these guys and stack them up behind our king. To make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to shrink these other two guys and make them a little further back. Just adjusting the composition a little bit more so it feels like we are looking at the king first, his right hand man second, and then the rest of the knights falling in line and following their king into battle. So just by adding a little bit of contrast to this frame, it's very clear now who is the first read, the second read, and then the third read. So my tip for you guys here is the thing that you want to be the most important in the frame, make it the most prominent. And usually that's with the darkest values, the most extreme contrast, and just making sure that that is the first read that you want the viewer to see. Usually things like the second read and tertiary read, those are things that help support the story or give a little bit more insight as to the context of what we're looking at. So here, again, our story is about a king who's leading his knights into battle, and he has his right-hand man right behind him. So for our third example here, I'm going to show you guys how you can create movement in a frame just by increasing the contrast. Since we've been working with mostly illustrations up till now, I'd want to switch gears and use typography and show you that the same principles apply. So for those of you who haven't had formal typography education, here's my tip for you. Type is not scary. Just treat it like any other shape and object and you will be fine. So if you keep the same principles that I've been teaching you in the first two examples, this one shouldn't be any different. So I'm going to show you how we can create a little bit of movement here between these three objects, this 1, 2, 3 that I typed out. First, I want 1 to be the first thing that we look at to establish that hierarchy. 2, I want to be the second thing, and then 3, I want to be the third thing. And I want to create this kind of nice clockwise motion in the frame. So I'm going to arrange these in clockwise order. I think to emphasize the movement here, I'm going to create a little bit more contrast between these three objects here, which is our type. And right now I'm using Museo Sans, but I like this font just because it has a lot of weights, and I could just show you that by adjusting the weight of this type, we can create a lot more rhythm and movement in this frame. I'm just going to make this 2 a little bit wider, or lighter. I'm going to make this 3 really light, and I think a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to adjust the value of this 1 to be a little bit darker. This 2, I'll probably leave it that value, and then 3 I'm going to make a little bit lighter. Oops. Just the 3. So, if I'm doing my job right, the way your eye should be moving is in this direction. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And so on and so forth. So you can see that just by adding contrast to the values, the weight, and size of these objects, I'm starting to create a nice rhythm in my frame. It's very, very simple, and it's the same rules that applied from the first two examples that I showed you guys. So just by controlling the hierarchy and controlling how the eye moves, we can definitely give a frame and any object, whether it's an illustration or typography, some nice movement and make it more dynamic. So I hope all of these examples were easy to follow and that you're on your way to making more dynamic compositions for your illustrations, photos, and designs. Let me give you guys those tips one more time that I gave through this video. 1, make sure you start extreme when you're adding contrast and then pull it back. 2, the thing that should be the most important in the frame should be the most prominent in the frame, so add more contrast to that thing, give it darker values. And the third tip, for you folks who haven't had a traditional typography education, treat type like any other object or shape. It's not scary, you can make type look good too. Let me know if these tips and examples were helpful to you by leaving a comment in the video, and tag me on social at Encina. I've also included below a few helpful links and resources in the description below, including my original Medium article with more examples for you to check out and follow along.
If you like this video and you'd like seeing more of this guy talk about motion design or anything else, comment below, like this video if you like it, and subscribe.
And if there's anything that you like, dislike, having a hard time following, just ask me the questions in the comments below. I'll respond. And let me know what you want to know more of, because I'd love to do more of these videos.
See you guys next time.